Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the beautiful Quebec City class. Quebec City is one of my favorite cities, and I've been there as recently as this summer. So I'll show you a number of photos and videos from my trip. We're going to do a virtual tour of Quebec, which will include, we will visit 10 of the top sites in the city. We're going to look at nearby day trips. I'm going to suggest some tours to further see the city. We will, of course, look at food and restaurants, and I'll show you a number of photos and videos throughout, as well as some 360-degree views and street views, so we can get a good overview of the city. So first of all, I'd like to give you a few of the facts about the city. So Quebec City has a population of about 550,000. So that makes it the 11th largest city in Canada. And on the upper left, this is the flag of Quebec City. Now, Quebec City is also the capital of the province of Quebec. And then here is the flag of the Quebec province, which you will see everywhere in Quebec. It's very popular. So Quebec City is one of the oldest European settlements in North America. Its old city is a UNESCO heritage site. It consists of an upper and lower city, as you can see by this photo here. So these buildings at the bottom are the lower city, which is right along the St. Lawrence River. And then we've got a bluff or cliff with the upper city here, including the Chateau Frontenac, which we will talk about shortly. It's the only walled city in North America, north of Mexico, that is. And in addition, most of the speakers are native French speakers. So as a result, it is the most European city in North America. So I'll give you a quick historical timeline, and then we can start our tour. So it was founded in 1608 by Samuel de Champlain. And in 1663, Quebec City became the capital of New France. So from then until 1759, the British and the French sort of took turns dominating that part of North America. And finally, in 1759, as part of the 7 Years' War, or what's called in North America the French and Indian War, with the Battle of Quebec on the Plains of Abraham, which is right by the city of Quebec, the British won, and then the city went under control of the British. This painting here on the left, by the way, is a famous 1770 painting, housed in the National Gallery of Ottawa, and it depicts the death of General James Wolfe. He was a British general on the Plains of Abraham, and that ended the siege of Quebec, and that's when Quebec went under British control. This is a very dramatic picture here. I doubt that his death was that pretty. So that happened on the Plains of Abraham. So in 1791, Quebec was named the capital of Lower Canada. Before Canada became one nation, it was part of the British Empire, and it was divided into an Upper and a Lower Canada. So by 1893, then, the Chateau Frontenac opened. It is the most well-known landmark in the city, and we'll talk about that shortly. In 1955, a famous winter carnival was established in Quebec City. The next one is going from January 25th to February 11th. This here is Bonham I'm not sure I pronounced that correctly, but he is the mascot of the Quebec Winter Carnival. By the way, Quebec gets very cold in the winter. It includes an ice palace. There are night parades with apparently people riding on blocks of ice. Sure enough, speaking of ice, there's an ice canoe race, ice and snow sculptures, and a snow bath. I don't think I would do that myself, but if you want to take a snow bath, you can go to the Quebec Winter Carnival. And then in 2008, the city celebrated its 400th anniversary. So the city is currently over 400 years old. So here's Quebec City in relation to where we are. So as you can see, Quebec City is northeast of the Chicago area. It's in Canada along the St. Lawrence River, and you can see that it is very close to Maine, north of New Hampshire and Vermont. So how would we go about getting there? The quickest way would be to fly, and you can fly directly from O'Hare to Jean Lesage International Airport in Quebec City. Takes about 2.5 hours. I don't know if that flight is available year round. So another option would be to take Air Canada, which will go through Montreal and then to Quebec City. And that takes about 6 hours. You can also drive there. It's not as far as you might think. It's about 16 hours direct. And you could stop at a good place halfway, such as Toronto, which is about 8 hours from the Chicago area and Quebec City. So you can drive there. If you really wanted to take a train, that would be hard to do. But if you wanted to, you could fly to Montreal and then take a 3-hour, 15-minute train. Or you could take the train from Toronto, which for some reason is 16 hours. So those are the options to get to Quebec. So these are the highlights that we're going to look at. To the right is a map. And number 1 on the map is Chateau Frontenac. We're going to look at 10 highlights, beginning with the Chateau Frontenac and then moving outward from there until we reach number 10, the Plains of Abraham, which is, of course, where General Wolfe met his demise. Now, Quebec City, if I didn't I believe, mention it's the only walled city in North America. So the first 7 places are within the walled UNESCO Heritage Old City, and the other 3 are not too far from outside of the walls. So the first thing we're going to look at is the Chateau Frontenac, which is this massive building here. This was opened in 1893 in the upper town of the city. It was designed to resemble a 14th or 15th century chateau of the Loire Valley in France. So let's check out this link that looks at the chateaus of the Loire Valley. Here's one, which I think looks pretty similar to the Chateau Frontenac. Here are some other ones. You can see the similarities in the architectural styles, like these conical towers, for example. Here's the one we looked at earlier. So it was designed to resemble a chateau of the Loire Valley. The chateau has had 3 additions between 1899 and 1924, including here in the middle, the 260-foot central tower. It's about 18 stories tall. The rooms at the hotel are very expensive. However, you are able to get a tour of the hotel if you would like, and I took one myself. Or you could just go in just to walk around and look. Here's a picture of the chateau in 1900. Notice we do not have this tall 18th century tower. And then here's a current photo of the lobby, which is very ornate. It is definitely a deluxe hotel. Here's some more images of the chateau. The larger one on the left is taken from a park called the Place d'Armes. Place d'Armes, if I said that correctly. Here's another picture on the upper right. These are famous staircases known as the lovers' staircases. There's a legend about it where a young couple got married and then vowed to return 60 years later. And when they got married, they had their photo taken on the stairs. And sure enough, 60 years later, they returned and also had their photo taken. At least that's a story that I heard, why it's called the Lover's Staircase. And then here's another picture looking from Lower Town. So the next thing we're going to look at is right next to the chateau, and it's called Dufferin Terrace. It's a boardwalk next to the chateau, which contains 6 gazebos. Right, here's a gazebo right here. It gives you an incredible view of the St. Lawrence River because the terrace is in the upper town and it overlooks the St. Lawrence River. There's also a funicular there, which goes from upper town to lower town. And furthermore, there's a toboggan slide in the winter. So let's have a look at that. Apparently, it's been there since 1884. So here's a toboggan slide in the winter. So you toboggan down the slide and then looks like you go quite a ways on Dufferin Terrace. And then, of course, there's a chateau. And then to the right, you can see the river. The terrace is also connected to Governor's Promenade. I'm going to show you that shortly. But first, let's have a 360-degree view. And bear with me as we open this up here. This is from a website called 360cities.com, which I highly recommend if you want to have these cool 360-degree views of the city. So here's one of the gazebos. Here's the chateau, the massive chateau here in the evening. Another gazebo. I think they sell ice cream there. And in addition, we also met at this gazebo on the left when we took our tour of the chateau. And then if you look towards the river, you can't see it that well because the railing sort of is in the way, but you could get a great view of the St. Lawrence River. And then on the other side of the river is a town called Levy, which has about 150,000 people. Oh, you know what? I just noticed I got a question. Somebody mentioned that cruise lines also go to Quebec City. So that would be another great way to go, right? Because the St. Lawrence is a massive river. It's huge and very wide. And you could also take a cruise. I don't know that much about that myself. But if you wish to take a cruise, you can do that as well. So as I mentioned before, the terrace is connected to Governor's Promenade. So I'm going to show you a video I took when we were on the promenade. And let's get past this first. All right. I kind of wish we didn't have the ads. We didn't have ads before. So sorry about the ads, but here's the Governor's Promenade. So this is another wooden walkway that will take you from to the plains of Abraham to Dufferin Terrace and the Chateau. In addition to this, we were in Quebec City during the summer. And as you may recall, there were big wildfires in Quebec, which amazingly did not affect our trip that much. But you can see that on this day, it was very hazy. So it's a lovely walkway that sort of goes along the cliff or the bluffs overlooking the river. You can kind of see the river there, but again, it's very hazy. And then eventually it will lead down these stairs. And then to the right of the stairs would be the toboggan. And then finally it leads to Dufferin Terrace and the Chateau. By the way, Quebec City, if I didn't mention before, is a wonderful city just to stroll around. So let's go check out our third featured place in Quebec, and that's the Quartier Petit Champlain. I did write some phonetic translations of some of the French words, so I hope my pronunciation is okay. Or you could call it the Petit Champlain Quarter. This is located in the lower town. So in the upper right is one of the streets which leads to the funicular. And then below that is a popular street called the Rue du Petit Champlain, one of the oldest commercial districts in North America. So this area is located at the cliff right under the chateau. I told you about the Rue du Petit Champlain, which is over here. And it has many gift shops, boutiques, and restaurants. It's a pedestrian-only street, and also just a lovely street to stroll around. The quarter is right by the St. Lawrence River and the Quebec-Lévis ferry. I'll tell you about that in a second. You can connect to the upper town in one of two ways. One is to take the breakneck steps. So I'm going to show you a picture of the steps. So here they are leading from lower to upper town, like so. Also a nice restaurant there. It's about 50 steps, so it wasn't all that bad. But if you don't want to take the steps, or if it's something you're not comfortable with, you also have a funicular, which leads from upper to lower town. So I'm going to show you a video of the funicular that I took. Now, I'm taking this from upper town to lower town because I figured it would give me a better view of the city. But normally you would probably want to do it in the other way. So from the lower to upper. So as we go down the funicular, you can see the beautiful St. Lawrence in the background. Here's the ferry, the city of Lévis across the water, and then you get a great view of the lower town. And then here comes the other funicular leading from the lower town to the upper town. So I cannot suggest the funicular enough. It's a lot of fun and gives you a great view of the city. So the fourth place that we'll look at, which is just down the street from the Quartier Petit Champlain, and that's Place Royale, which is this small square here. It's the location of where Samuel de Champlain founded the city way back in 1608. Used to be called the Place du Marché because it was a marketplace until 1686 when it changed its name to the Place Royale. Furthermore, it has the church, the Notre Dame victories, I think it's Victoire in French, Notre Dame de Victoire Church, built in 1688. It is the oldest stone church in North America. The square also has a bust of Louis XIV. He was king when New France was founded. In the 60s and 70s, they did some extensive restorations. So all these old buildings look immaculate. It's a combination of like colonial and British, colonial French and colonial British architecture. So then the restored houses have restaurants and souvenir shops and gift shops or other kinds of stores. This is one of the best places to get a coffee or an ice cream and just to hang out. So let's do a 360 view. I wish these would open up a little quicker, but once they do, they look pretty good. So here's the other side of the square that we didn't see in the picture. Here's the church, Notre Dame de Victoire, which is also worth going into. It's beautiful, and it has a ship hanging from the ceiling, which makes it pretty cool. Here's the statue, the bust of Louis XIV. And then here to the left, this building that has kind of the burgundy color is Maison de la Smith. I don't think I have that correct, but we'll look at that later on in the class. But it's a great place for coffee, pastries, or snacks. And then if we keep looking around the square, right, you can see here's a good outdoor eating spot. The buildings are immaculate and well maintained and beautiful. Notice all the flowers everywhere. So Place de Royale, one of the best places to see in the city. Here's a couple other images. So here is an art installation. I don't know how they did this, but they had these silvery curved lines on a variety of buildings. The one here in the back is in Place Royale. And if you stand at a certain area, it looks like a whole bunch of concentric circles. So that was very cool. Furthermore, there is this famous mural which covers the history of Quebec City right outside the square. And here you can see the old stone church. All right, so then if you're in Place Royale or in the lower town, you might consider taking the Quebec City ferry. Here it is here. The ferry can give you an amazing view of the city at sunset. So that would be the best time to take it. It goes from Quebec to Lévis. It's about 1 kilometer long and takes about 12 minutes, connecting Quebec City and Lévis. So let's go ahead and have a look. First of all, here's the city of Lévis. And sure enough, here's the ferry coming from the city. It's a pretty attractive looking city in its own right across the river from Quebec. And the fares are about $3 Canadian, which I think would be a roughly $2.25 US. Speaking of the ferry, let's go on the ferry virtually. So here's a Google Street View showing us on the ferry. It's leaving from Quebec City, which you can see behind us. And then if we turn around and look at the front, you can see that we're headed towards Lévis. And then there is the huge St. Lawrence River. Does anyone have any questions in the meantime? All right, let's proceed on our journey. And we're going to go to another Notre Dame, the Notre Dame de Quebec. Oh, I went too far. Notre Dame de Quebec Basilica, shown here to the left. Now, it was first constructed in 1647, which makes it older than the other Notre Dame. But because it's been destroyed twice by fire, it is no longer the oldest stone church. The history behind the cathedral is that in 1664, it became the first parochial church in North America, north of Mexico. In 1874, it was declared a basilica by Pope Pius IX. It currently has a neoclassical facade and two asymmetrical towers, and it's also beautiful on the inside. The cathedral also has a holy door. So you might be wondering, what is a holy door? I mean, I think it's roughly, if the Vatican decides it's going to be a holy door, it is. So this church had a holy door authorized during its construction. So here is a picture of the holy door right here. The holy door only opens on special occasions such as jubilees, and the next time it's due to open will be 2024, and that'll be the 350th anniversary of the Quebec diocese. And then if you go down, here's another shot of the holy door. I just got a question. How long would you suggest staying in Quebec City? I would say, now it's not like a huge city, right? It's not like a massive metropolitan area, but I would recommend 5 days minimum, because not only does the city have a number of amazing attractions in its own right, but there's a number of places nearby that are worth seeing too. Day trips, and I'll tell you about some of those day trips shortly. Before we move on to the next part, let me show you a video of the interior of the church, which should come up in just a moment. Hold on one second. I thought I hit full screen, but apparently I did not. So here's like the main altar. I know there's like a technical term for parts of the church, but for some reason I'm never able to retain that. But this is the front part of the church. It's very ornate and beautiful. They had beautiful music playing in there while we were there. And then we're now looking at the other port. This might actually be the nave, if I'm not mistaken. You can see the organ there, and then we can walk down one of the transepts on the side. So it's a lovely church, and I highly recommend going just to look at the art on the inside. So our final place that is within the fortifications of the city is actually the fortifications themselves. So like I mentioned before, it's the only walled city in North America, north of Mexico, that is. You can see the walls here. They were built between 1608 and 1871. It's about 4.6 kilometers of ramparts with 4 gates, 3 Martello towers, which I think is the green conical tower here. And it also makes a citadel. It has a citadel, I should say. And then here's a picture from above. You'll see it has that typical star-shaped pattern that you'll get for a fortification. The four gates, by the way, are named Kent Gate, Prescott Gate, Saint Jean Gate, and Saint Louis Gate. This picture here is near Saint Jean Gate. In 1948, the fortifications were designated a Quebec National Historic Site. There are also guided walking tours available. Although I did not take one, apparently you can walk along the walls, but they were doing some significant renovation on one of the walls, so I did not have that as an option. Right. I got a comment, naves and apses and sanctuaries about the church. I'm going to need to educate myself on the parts of a church for my next class. Let's look at some more of the fortifications. Right here is one of the gates. And actually from here, I did go up on top of the wall. And normally you could walk through this black door here, but we couldn't because of the renovations going on. So we were stuck. There was some kind of school group outside of the Citadel here. Upper right, another great picture of the wall. And then here, I think is a St. Louis Gate. So from here, let's go not far from this gate is the Quebec National Parliament. So here it is here, Parliament Building of Quebec. It's just outside the fortifications, designed by Eugene Etienne and built in the late 19th century. It was inspired by the Louvre in Paris. It's the home of the National Assembly with 125 elected members. And here is what the National Assembly looks like on the inside, where the assembly meets. The front wall has a total of 26 bronze statues. You could kind of see some of them throughout this picture. And then in front of the Parliament is a beautiful fountain, the Fontaine des Tournées. I'm going to show you a 360-degree view of the fountain and tell you the story, which is a very interesting story. So I'm going to back up a little bit. Here's the fountain. You can see the Parliament here. If you look towards the right of the fountain, now you can see the fortifications of the city. Right here is Chateau Frontenac. Here's another building in the old city. I can't remember what it's called, but it was the only skyscraper. It's an Art Deco skyscraper built in like 1930. And then after that was constructed, it was decided that there would be no more skyscrapers in the old part of town. And then you can see it's during the spring because we have all these yellow tulips everywhere. So here's the story of the fountain. It was designed in 1853 by a French sculptor named Moreau. From there, after he designed it, copies were cast in iron and one was displayed at the Paris World's Fair of 1855. So from there, 2 copies went to Bordeaux, France. But then in 1960, they were dismantled so they could make way for an underground parking lot. Hopefully that wouldn't be done today. But in the 60s, it made sense. Like, we need more parking. Let's get rid of this beautiful fountain. So one of the fountains, this one as shown here, went to a Paris antique dealer. And then in the early 2000s, a Quebec City businessman named Peter Simon visited the antique dealer and fell in love with the fountain. So from there, he purchased it. It was restored and then presented to Quebec City on the city's 400th anniversary in 2008. So that's the story of the fountain. Oh, please define citadel. Thank you. That's a great question. And actually, I'm glad you asked that because that came up recently. A citadel basically is a fortress, but it's a fortress that's in an urban area. So a fortress in a city, for example, would be a citadel. So thank you. That was a good question. And like I said, something that I just thought about recently. All right, so not far from Parliament is a popular street in Quebec City called Grande Allée. It's a great place to go out with your friends. There's a lot of restaurants, bars, microbreweries, nightclubs, live entertainment. It developed into a very well-to-do street from its humble beginnings as a former country road. The street is famous for its Victorian architecture. It has been called the Champs-Élysées of Quebec City. I am of the opinion, though, that calling it that does the street a disservice because, frankly, frankly, it does not compare to the Champs-Élysées, but it is a very cool street in its own right. I hit my keyboard and got out of my slideshow. Sorry about that. So in the 1980s, that's when it became a hub of Quebec City nightlife. It's also the location of the Musée National des Beaux-Arts de Quebec. Let's have a look at the inside of that museum. So that's something I highly recommend. Let's look at the street at night from our 360-degree view. So you can see it's a pretty lively street, right? There's a lot of people eating outside or having a beverage. The architecture is beautiful. Now, this building here, the kind of ugly building in the background, is called Ciel with an exclamation point. It means sky in French. It has a rotating restaurant on the top. So that would be a great place to get a great view of the city. Good question. Are we in the upper or lower part? This would be in the upper section. We are in the upper portion of town. I would say a majority of the city, because of course it's much larger than the part that we're covering, but most of the city is in the upper town. Just a small part of the city is in the lower town near the river. So that's Grande Allée. The alley, by the way, also leads to the Plains of Abraham, which is shown here. It's kind of like the Central Park of Quebec City. It is a large park that belonged to somebody named Abraham Martin or Martine in the 1660s. So that's why it got the name Plains of Abraham. As I mentioned before, that's where that pivotal battle was fought between the British and the French, which led to British control of Quebec. Although what I didn't really clarify earlier is that fortunately it did not lead to the end of French culture. The Quebecois people were able to maintain their their culture up to today. So Plains of Abraham connects to Dufferin Terrace by the Governor's Promenade. It also contains the Joan of Arc Garden, which is beautiful. So I'm going to show you a picture of that. Here it is on a beautiful late spring summer day, the Joan of Arc Garden. In fact, you can kind of scroll through the pictures on this website. It has this famous statue of Joan of Arc, as well as a whole bunch of beautiful native flowers, like native to the area. So I highly recommend it. And there's also a big stage that serves as a venue for cultural events such as the Festival d'été de Quebec. I know I mispronounced that, but it's a popular summer festival in Quebec. So here they are in the stage. You can't help but notice all the Quebec flags. Looks like I've got a question. Outside the walls is a place, a shot tower, Plains of Abraham, where uniformed enactors, General Wolfe's British and Montcalm French. Yes, Montcalm was the French general. He also lost his life. Yes, so there's like uniformed people that will discuss the campaign. That is correct. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to do that myself. What I did notice, thank you for your comment, by the way. What I did notice, you do see a lot of people in period costume throughout the city, like from the colonial era, for example, and I'll show you some examples so we go further on in the class. So that's all we're going to look at in the city for now. As I mentioned before, though, it's close to some great places to take a quick day trip. And these are 4 places I recommend. All of them less than an hour from the city, and 3 of these are less than a half hour. So you'll notice we've got Quebec City here. One is Montmorency Falls, only like 15 minutes away. Here's let me see, find my pronunciation, Ile d'Orléans, or the Isle of Orleans. Then there's the Basilica of Saint-Anne-de-Beaupré, and then up here is Jacques Cartier National Park, a beautiful park in a beautiful river valley. And I'll show you a picture of that shortly. In addition, Quebec City is about 2.5 hours from Montreal, which is another city that's well worth your visit for architecture, food, culture. It's also about 5 times the size of Quebec City. Well, maybe not quite that big, but maybe 4, but it's definitely larger. So let's look at the places we can visit on an easy day trip from Quebec City. So the first are these falls, Montmorency Falls, which lead from one of these cliffs or bluffs into the St. Lawrence eventually. Here it is in the winter on the right, and you can see down here are some people, which kind of give the falls a scale, if you will. And if we look at the 360-degree view from an observation platform near the falls, so here we are on our observation platform, and you could turn a little to the right. Here are the falls. Here's the St. Lawrence River. You'll notice a bridge here that will connect to our next destination, the Isle of Orleans. Now, if I zoom in, though, from this view, you can actually see the skyline of Quebec City. So that's how close these falls are to Quebec City. In addition to that, you can go ziplining. This will also give you an idea of the scale of the falls. So let's have a look at somebody ziplining. Once we get through this commercial. So here we go. You can actually zip line across the falls, and then it'll lead you to this platform. So if you like zip lining, that would be definitely something that you would want to try. The falls, by the way, are 83 meters high, about 272 feet. So it's actually about 30 meters taller than Niagara Falls. So from there, we're very close to the Ile d'Oléon, which is an island in the St. Lawrence River. It's only about 5 kilometers or about 3 miles east of Quebec City. It's very pastoral. It's 21 miles long by about 5 miles wide. So it's a very large island. It has about 7,000 people living on it. It's spread over 6 villages. It's an inspiration for artists, the countryside, and in fact, let's look at a beautiful estate called La Seigneurie de Ile d'Orléans. It's a beautiful estate with lavender fields. And that's going to be coming up shortly. So here's the gate. You already get lavender on the website. It's also a good place to buy lavender products, of course. So here's a beautiful lavender field. I did not go to the island my last trip, but I did the first time I went, and that was during the winter. And one thing that I remember about it was all of the pipes that were leading from the maple trees to draw syrup. And we'll talk about maple syrup soon enough, because that's a big deal in Quebec. Here's some more pictures, a cottage. Here is a view from up high. You can see all the farms on the island. And then here's the bridge that connects to the island from the mainland, if you will. So then towards the very end of the island, in fact, I'm going to go back for a second. So here's like where the island starts in relation to the city. And then kind of towards the end, you're going to see our third site, which is the Basilica of Saint Anne de Beaupré. One of the most fascinating churches that I've been to. It's one of Canada's 8 national shrines. It's been credited with the church for its miracles and curing of the sick and disabled. Now, I didn't see any of that myself while I was there, but there is a place in the church where supposedly people will put their crutches because they no longer need it. So I don't know if that's true, but it is cool to see all these crutches in the church. It's like I mentioned, it's an important Catholic sanctuary and pilgrimage site. It receives about 500,000 pilgrims each year. Here's the inside. Here's the outside with the fountain. I'll show you a picture of it without the fountain in just a second. To me, the most impressive part of the church, though, was the ceiling, which has this beautiful mosaic that shows you It describes the life of Saint Anne, who I believe, Saint Anne, I believe, is the Virgin Mary's mother. So here is the ceiling right here. I'd like to zoom in though a little bit. I didn't quite like that view much. Well, I guess we can work with that. So here you could kind of get a better idea, right? Here's some descriptions of the life of Saint Anne. You can see the figures. It's really a very beautiful and impressive ceiling. So I recommend going there as well. So here's a picture from the outside. It's a pretty large church. And then on the right, I mentioned that it's a pilgrimage site. So there's actually a campground and RV park next to the church for all the many millions, well, I guess 500,000, for all the many thousands of pilgrims that visit each year. So our last day trip, which is only about 45 minutes away, is Jacques Cartier National Park. It's in one of Quebec's beautiful glacial valleys and has a surface area of about 670 square kilometers. So people like to go to this park to do things like hike. There's at least 62 miles of hiking trails. There are about 20 miles of biking trails. People will go there for kayaking, fishing, canoeing. And then in the winter, people will go there for tubing, snowshoeing, and skiing. So if you like the outdoors, you should go to Jacques Cartier National Park. You could even stay there too, because they have 9 cabins, 114 campsites, and 5 yurts, which is where I would want to stay. So let's go back to the city. One of my favorite things to do in Quebec is just simply to wander around. It's a great city for walking, and you never know what you're going to see. Like this picture on the right, it looks like you're back in time, right? This could be 200 years ago, except maybe for the street signs here. Or here, there was this one old style alley which had all these umbrellas above. Except for this one row was not open for some reason, but it was still pretty impressive. Lower right, the architecture is beautiful. That looks very French colonial. There's also a restaurant in here, which I ate at, and I'll tell you about that shortly. So no matter where you're walking, you can see something interesting. For example, here on the lower left, and that was on our hazy day, they had, I don't know what these were, but it sort of looked like lampshades on this city street. This street, we were well out of the old city. Same with this picture in the middle, but even outside of the old city, the architecture is very interesting. Right, you never know when you're going to encounter a narrow stairwell that leads somewhere beautiful. Here in the upper left is Saint Jean Street. It's a lively street, pedestrian only, a good place to get something to eat or ice cream or to buy a souvenir. And then here's a few pictures at night. In some ways, the city looks even more magical at nighttime. So let's talk about some tours. I won't go too in depth on these because all of the handouts should have a link to each of these tours. By the way, the handouts don't follow along with the class necessarily. Mostly, it does show you links of everything we cover, as well as some additional links. But mostly, it gives you like helpful links to help you plan a tour there if you would like. So here's the tourist office, a tourist information office in Quebec. We went there and signed up for a Quebec City walking tour. Other tours I would suggest is definitely do a guided tour of the chateau. A ghost tour is fun as well. A food tour is a must because Quebec City has some delicious food, which we'll cover more in depth shortly. There's also a bus tour that takes you through the old town in Montmorency Falls and a boat tour. Ah, you know what? I got your message. May I ask if you can put your email into the question here, or you could put it in the chat, and then I can email you the handout. So feel free to do that, and then I'll make sure you get the handout. All right, so now here's some pictures from our Quebec City walking tour. The tour basically walks you through the old town. Here's our guide. He will give you some historical background and like interesting details about the architecture. There was like an Ursuline convent there that, for example, he'll tell you about that, about the chateau, about some of the battles that were fought there. And I think I mentioned before, it's about an hour and a half long. Great introduction to the old portion of the city. So here we have the guided tour of the Chateau Frontenac. Here we are inside the lobby. And then here is our guide in period costume from, I believe, the late 1800s. So you'll learn things about like famous people that have stayed there, historical events. You'll learn more about its architectural development and the additions that were made over the years. I wish it would show more of the chateau. Like I wouldn't mind seeing like some of the rooms, but overall it is well worth it. You do get to see there's a dining room called the Champlain Dining Room. A lot of things in Quebec are named after Champlain. But there's a sculpture which I'd like to show you now because I took a brief video. So you could kind of see it here, and it's sort of weird looking. Like, what on earth is this? It sort of looks like a snake. If I've got it correctly, well, I do know for sure this sculpture represents a part of the St. Lawrence River, and I believe it's from Quebec City to Montreal. So it basically shows the shape of the river as well as the corresponding depths. So it's a really fascinating sculpture. So you have to do the tour if you go there. In the meantime, I think I have a couple questions. Terrific. Thank you for those who sent an email. Yes, that's true. Thank you for your comment. There is a band called Ween that has an album called Quebec, which actually is pretty good, and you can get it at least through Interlibrary alone. All right, so in the meantime, let's go to our next tour, Ghost Tour of Quebec. And now here we've got another guy in period costume. I think he's from the late 1700s, carries a lantern, tells you all kinds of like creepy stories. And you know what? Even if you think it's all like bunk, I would recommend going on the tour anyway, because you never know what you're going to see. We went into some places, some beautiful places in the city that we would not have seen otherwise. Like here's a street called Rue Sous le Cap, which was a should open in just a second. It was this amazing street in the lower town that was along the let me turn around, like along the bluffs of like along the cliff face, and they're all like connected by these walkways. Like I would not even have known that this street existed, right? Here's the cliff right next to it. So yeah, we got to go through this street as part of the tour. So yes, plus you get a costume guide like this, so it's definitely worth doing. Um, Food tours. These are some of the most popular dishes in Quebec. Poutine on the left, crepes in the middle, and then there's some pastries on the right. I'll tell you more about the food shortly. I just got a question. What are people like in Quebec in general? I found overall most of them were terrific. They were yeah, everybody was really polite and helpful. And I found that people there seem to be pretty joyful overall, like they know how to have fun. I mean, you will get sometimes you'll run into somebody who's having a bad day, but overall, I don't have, yeah, I have nothing bad to say about the people of Quebec. All right, so now another tour. You could do the bus tour. Here's one of the tour buses. This you can pick up a bus right by Place d'Armes, which is near the chateau, and then that will take you to the falls. And then finally, I can't recommend this one enough. There's a boat cruise that takes you from Quebec, and we went about as far as the falls and then return. So if you don't mind, I'm going to show you a few highlights from the video I took. Oh yeah, by the way, if you couldn't tell before, there was a guide there also in period costume. Hold on a second. I thought I opened it full screen, but apparently not. Here we go. So here we are leaving. I'm gonna go back real quick. Here's the ferry. Okay, it was too quick. So you get a beautiful view of the city. There's the ferry. Here we are going away from the city, going east on the St. Lawrence River. This is the bridge that connects to the Isle of Orleans, which you can see just to the right. And then as we turn around, you'll see Montmorency Falls shown right here. So it goes, you get a good view of the falls from the tour. You have food options, there's a gift shop on the boat. You get a costume tour guide who right here, he speaks in both French and English. And in addition, the day that we were there, it was a spectacularly beautiful day. So I would recommend doing that as well. Let's talk about one of my favorite things to travel. We're going to talk about food, and then we'll conclude with like a few souvenir ideas. So let me talk a bit about Quebec City food. So overall, it was inspired by the cuisine of northern France, and it's very heavy. They have really cold winters in Quebec, like I mentioned before. And as a result, the food is very hearty. So it's kind of a combination of northern French cuisine as well as uh, food that was available around the area. So right here's like a croque Monsieur sandwich that we got, and I'll tell you about that croissant shortly. On the upper right is a place called a Sugar Shack. Those are very popular in Quebec. Primarily, it has to do with maple syrup and maple syrup products. And I'll show you how maple taffy is made shortly, because you have to try that if you're there. Lots of wonderful outdoor restaurants, at least in the summer, probably not so much in the winter. So I'm going to talk about the signature foods of Quebec. I'm going to give you 4 bakery recommendations and then some recommended restaurants. So some of the most popular foods are anything maple. So that could include maple taffy, pudding chômeur. I know I mispronounced that. Maple pudding, in other words. You've got to try it. You've got to get maple syrup there. I believe Quebec makes about 70% of the world's maple syrup. And that's why it's such a popular item there. You should also try the French Canadian crepes. You can get them just like you do in France. You get it either savory or sweet. And most of the time you want to put maple syrup on it, whether it's savory or sweet. Poutine, I think I mentioned that before. I showed you a picture of that before. The first time I heard about poutine, I thought it was weird. But it's French fries with cheese curds and then brown gravy. And it's actually delicious. I would recommend getting poutine there. And you could get it in a number of different manners. For example, we had an Italian style poutine, so it had mozzarella and red sauce on fries. Now, maybe not the healthiest thing to eat, but since you are on vacation, it's okay. There's also meat pies are very popular. Here's a meat pie in the lower left. Or pâté chinois. That's a casserole shown in the upper left, made with ground meat, corn, and mashed potatoes. So it's sort of like a shepherd's pie, and it's really good. So now I'm going to show you maple taffy, and this is something you'll see commonly in a sugar shack. So basically, it could be made in snow or shaved ice. So it's like a highly concentrated, boiled, thick maple syrup, which is then poured out in a line on the snow. And then you could see the person has what looks like popsicle sticks. And then she's going to roll up like so. She's going to roll up a portion of the syrup, which will then get colder and solidify on the snow. And then you get to eat it. It's fantastic. So you have to do maple taffy. All right, so let's talk about some bakeries. These actually, I managed to visit all 4 of these, and these are 4 of the top bakeries there. So first of all, there's the Boulangerie Pâtisserie Le Crochambouche, and it has one of the best pastries I've ever had. It's a strawberry jammed filled croissant, which you should get if you go there. So I'll show you a picture of the croissant shortly. The next is Café Le Maison Smith on Place Royale. The pastries are delicious and the coffee is good, plus the location couldn't be better. So if you get a pastry and a coffee or a sandwich and then sit outside in Place Royale, that could make for a great afternoon. La Boîte à Pain is another bakery we went to, which has a cruffin, and that's a cross between let me try again. It's a cross between a croissant and a muffin, and it's excellent. And then finally, the place shown here is right on St. Jean Street, right in the middle of the old city. It's called Paillard, and it's was very busy when we went there, and you could just get all kinds of pastry assortments there, and coffee, and sandwiches, and other kind of beverages. So here are some of the photos of the pastries. This is the strawberry croissant au fraise. It is amazing. Here then is the cruffin on the upper left, as well as some other pastry that we had, which I forgot what that was called. That was at Boîte à Pain. And then you can get various things like macaron. They've got this dish here, this pastry. I don't remember what it's called, but it's sort of like a rolled up croissant with raisins in it. It's delicious. So now let's talk about some of the restaurants. So one of those I mentioned before was 1640 Bistro. That was that beautiful red building, which we showed in a previous picture. And it's right by the Chateau Frontenac, so it's a good place to sit and eat outside. Another place was called La Bouche. I'm going to show you some of their dishes. It's rich. So it's based on a sugar shack, and all the food there is very rich. So here's like some meat pies. I'm not even sure what that is. It looks like some kind of chicken glazed with maple. Here we've got some poutine. Another chicken dish with beans, probably a lot of maple syrup in it. This looks like pork rinds of some sort. So I did eat there. It's delicious. And I wouldn't eat there every day though, because then I'd put on like 50 pounds. To the left then was La Petite Cabane à Sucre de Quebec. Again, sorry for the mispronunciation. That's a sugar shack that's right on right in the lower town on Rue des Petites Champlain, Rue des Petites Champlain. That's where we got the maple taffy. There's another place called La Cochon Dingay. Other places, there's one called Le Continental, which serves sort of classic 1950s style cuisine. This place here on the right is very interesting. It's called Le Restaurant aux Anciens Canadiens. The building itself is about 300 years old, and it serves classic Quebecois cuisine with servers in period costume, and there's a fireplace in there. Let's check out their menu. Yeah, your tab just crashed. Okay, I hope I can restore it. Otherwise, we might not be able to check out the menu. I'm going to try it again. That is a drawback sometimes of doing an online class. Okay, here we go. So first of all, here's the menu in French, but I'm going to go down to the English menu. So some of the dishes there, it's classic Quebecois. Pea soup, grand mère, wild meat creton. There's a Quebec meat pie with fruit ketchup. Garlic snails au gratin. So you've got the French influence, of course. Poutine. So some of the main courses, there's Grandma's Treat. So that contains Quebec meat pie, meatball ragout, and baked beans. The dishes here, again, very hearty. They've got warm duck confit poutine. That sounds very decadent. There's bison served on puff pastry. And for desserts, at least 3 of them have maple. So that's where you can go for classic Quebecois cuisine. Another recommendation is Le Petit Chateau. That's right by the Chateau Frontenac and a great place for crepes. And then there's Ristorante Il Teatro. You can get Italian, and that's by St. Jean Gate. Do they have any healthy food places, like for those of us who are gluten-free? Great question. Oh, and somebody ate at Anciens Canadiens. Yeah, it's fantastic. I did not eat there the last time. I ate there before during the winter. I actually think it's a better restaurant in the winter because of the hearty cuisine and the fireplace. That's a great question on gluten-free. I will say it is a pretty cosmopolitan city, and I am sure there are healthy options. And if you don't mind, I should even be able to look some up. I did do a Yelp search to see what other kinds of restaurants you can find in Quebec. So, for example, of course, you've got the Quebecois and the French restaurants. Let me close this out. But from my search, I also found 18 Lebanese restaurants. So Lebanese restaurants are very popular in Quebec, and actually, I ate at one of them, and it was delicious. There are 8 Moroccan restaurants. I also ate in a Moroccan restaurant, and it was a very cozy restaurant in like a hundreds years old brick building that was great. They have some Korean, there was 2 Peruvian restaurants, and there was even one Norwegian restaurant. So you can pretty much get a wide variety of cuisines in Quebec. And there is, from my search, there is one called Don Vegan Restaurant. So that's a good sign. And in fact, TripAdvisor has 10 best healthy restaurants in Quebec. So you can definitely, right, here's one for poke bowl. So that's like sushi, for example. So the answer is yes. I don't really have any current recommendations, but you can find healthy food. And I assume gluten-free as well. Because I think right now there's like enough people who are like sensitive to gluten that it's a pretty common, that it's not that hard nowadays. I mean, I shouldn't put it that way, but at least in a major city, there should be some options. And there is something called Veravan 2.0, which is a gluten-free restaurant in Quebec City. So you do have some options. I don't know that there's a ton of options, but there are some options. All right, so now we're going to conclude. Oh, these are some photos of the restaurants I told you about. Here's Continental, Le Cochon Dingue. Here's 1640 restaurant in the lower left. They had a great outdoor patio. So to conclude, we'll talk about some of the popular souvenirs that you could pick up as a gift or to take home for yourself. So sure enough, of course, maple products are very popular. We even found on the left, we found this artwork, framed artwork, advertising maple syrup in Quebec. But you could also get syrup, candy, and cookies. There are First Nation souvenirs. You can get artwork from the Rue du Trésor, which is a small alley where a bunch of local artists will post their art prints. And it's pretty close to the middle of town, so it's right by the chateau. it's a good place to at least browse around for artwork. Oh yes, Quebec, it's very cold, so it's a good place to get cold weather clothing, like hats, sweaters, mittens, and gloves. You could also get religious souvenirs at like the Notre Dame de Quebec Basilica or Saint Anne de Beaupré. And finally, there is a Christmas boutique in Quebec that's very impressive. And let's see if we could go visit their site. You can get all kinds of ornaments there. Here's the outside. They have a virtual tour, by the way, so we could kind of look at the inside, kind of like a Google Street View. So here's the inside. It has ornaments of all kinds, including Quebec City ornaments and some other Quebec souvenirs as well. There's the outside. We could kind of go down the hallway. So this is the Christmas store in Quebec. You can also get like nativity scenes and other Christmas decorations. It's a lovely store. I actually bought an ornament there myself. So on that note, that is our virtual tour of Quebec. And at this point, I am open for any questions that you may have. Thanks to those who gave me your email so I can send you the handout. Somebody mentioned great books from the library that offer self-walking tours with loads of info, photos and fromers. Yes, we have those guides in the travel department. On the second floor of the library. So we definitely have a number of Quebec City travel books. But just know the handout I gave you has a bunch of other useful, helpful links. Thank you. Thank you. Again, I am going to record this class